Some of the views expressed on the Mormon Channel are solely for the education and inspiration of our audience and may not represent the official position of the Church.
One of the most remarkable aspects of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is its unique history. Throughout the world, great stories from faithful church members have only added to that history. This program shares some of these incredible stories of faith, perseverance, hope, and inspiration. You're listening to Legacy. I'm your host, Nathan Wright. Activities among the youth are an integral part of the program for youth of the church. Today we'll discuss why activities became part of the early Young Ladies organization, what some of those activities were, and how those activities have evolved to what young women enjoy today. Joining me today for this third discussion about young women are members of the Young Women History Committee, Jill Mulvey-Durr and Brittany Chapman from the Church History Department, and Christine Van Wagenen and Carol McConkey from the Young Women General Board. Also serving on this committee are Jan Pinborough, Managing Editor of the Friend magazine, Kathleen Peterson, past member of the Young Women General Board, and Julie Bagley, member of the Young Women General Board. One might think that the lives of girls in the early days of the Young Ladies organization were so full of, let's say, time-consuming physical labor that there wouldn't be much need for organized recreation. What was the purpose of early activities, and why did the church feel the need to provide recreation for the youth? Who can answer that for me?
It's so interesting and exciting to recognize that when Brigham Young first established the Young Ladies organization, one of the key phrases and points of his declaration in establishing this organization was to improve everything that is good and beautiful. It runs in harmony with the concluding part of the 13th Article of Faith. It says, if there is anything virtuous, lovely, of good report, or praiseworthy, we seek after these things. That also became apparent very quickly that in order to keep young women's interest and engage them and get their continued participation in activities that would help them improve, that also needed to be inviting and fun, and that there needed to be a critical mass of young women, that the sociality, the fellowship of the saints, if you will, was very important. And also, as in 1875, when Brigham Young established the Young Men's Mutual Improvement Association, it gave the opportunity for joint activities to be held between young ladies and young men, which was very exciting, I'm sure, and thrilling for them. I think one of the key purposes in having the church provide these opportunities was so that they would have a place to go where they could assemble with these other youth and participate in ways that would promote building of testimonies and keeping standards high, where they might feel the companionship of the Holy Ghost and learn how to use their leisure time in ways that were wholesome and uplifting and inspiring. It's interesting that at that time, it had been something like 30 years since the saints had settled Salt Lake City, and there had been establishments that were of ill repute and bars and taverns set up. And so there needed to be a place for these youth to come and be protected from those influences. They also wanted to be able to provide recreation that would allow youth to develop physically, socially, intellectually, morally, and to develop a well-balanced, well-rounded personality that would be more useful for the kingdom of God and building the kingdom of God. Early on in the 1890s, the General Young Ladies Presidency wrote to the leaders that they were seeking after perfect womanhood, and so they would labor and in everything which would tend to your development physically, mentally, and morally, and that's what should be adopted by the associations. They were hoping to help achieve a well-balanced mind, a strong, healthy body, and the full development of a young woman's spiritual nature to enable her to use her natural forces for her own best interest and the greatest benefit to the human family. And that was Sister Elmina Taylor, the president of the Young Ladies Mutual Improvement Association, speaking. We also have access to a 1928 volume of MIA Handbook, which outlines objectives for the Mutual Improvement Association, of which both the young men and the young ladies participated. And the objectives there were outlined, were very much the same. And it's very fun to read those and kind of get a sense of the language. And as they invited leaders to participate in engaging youth in these activities, they wanted them to be live people. And they put that word in quotes, live people, and they wanted them to be, the activities to be snappy and peppy. And so they were inviting an enthusiasm and engaging youth in activities that would be fun and yet worthwhile at the same time.
So here they are in the mid-1800s, and since the invention of volleyball and softball are still a few decades away, what were some of the areas of recreation for the young ladies of the Mutual Improvement Association?
Well, Nathan, I think that speech and drama were two of the first kinds of activities in which young women were involved together with young men. Speaking, of course, had been emphasized by Brigham Young in discussing with his daughters originally the importance of being able to bear testimonies of the truth. And this is something he had underscored with young men as well. I think I might have shared on an earlier program a little excerpt from 11th Ward Minutes in 1871, where the President, Mary Ann Fries, told her sisters, "By speaking we gain confidence and improve our language. By speaking, new ideas are elicited." So from the beginning, teaching young women to speak and express themselves was very important. And I think it's kind of fun, the different aspects that surrounded speech and how those developed over time. In the 1890s, for example, recitations were very popular, these dramatic recitations of poems or popular speeches. By the turn of the century, there were these conjoint meetings of young men and young women. They often met together for an opening program and closing program, as they called it. I think in my day we talked about it as opening exercises.
Right.
But they had they wanted something, as Carol indicated, that would be snappy and peppy. So they turned to storytelling. They wanted the young men and young women to develop skills for storytelling. And then they urged the use of storytelling in other contexts as well. Carol mentioned the 1928 handbook. As these recreational programs elaborated, there were several manuals. I've been looking at a community activity manual for 1933 that has a speech section, and there is a large section on storytelling, even 30 years after this initial push for storytelling. And I liked this little section of the manual. The ability to tell a story well is an accomplishment to be desired by young and old, by mothers who would train their little ones in the most effective way, by teachers who would make their teachings vital, by missionaries who would attractively present the gospel story to an indifferent world, by the young man or woman who would possess a gift which will add greatly to his charm and which will make him welcome in any group. So I think this is interesting emphasis on storytelling that is not so much with us now, but continued for a long time as part of the Mutual Improvement Association's emphasis on speech. Interestingly, this same 1933 manual had another section which I found fascinating, and that was on conversation. So one of the ways to help young people improve and enhance their sociability and recreation was to teach them the art of conversation. I love lesson 2 in this manual is on the graciousness of conversation. It talks about introductions and responses to them, cultivating a memory for names, courtesy and tact, such as cultivate the habit of listening, sincerity, having a knowledge of diversified topics. And I thought it was interesting. I grew up in the 1950s. I wasn't quite in Mutual then, but I can see from 1958, this emphasis on conversation was still part of the speech program. And the leadership training at June Conference in 1958 included rules for a conversation. Avoid all purely subjective talk. Don't monopolize the conversation. Don't interrupt. Speak distinctly, as I stumbled over the words. A good conversationalist is cheerful and alive. Avoid destructive talk. So these things were part of the Mutual program to help young people improve. And then, of course, the part of the speech program that I remember, I think, a little better, the emphasis on public address, which was also an important part of the 1933 manual and received a lot of emphasis in ensuing years. In fact, in the 1940s and 50s, the Mutual adopted manuals about public speaking. One from Lowell Lee, So You Want Me to Give a Speech, and the one I remember from Royal L. Garf, You Can Learn to Speak. So that we had speech directors in Mutual, in the MIA, Mutual Improvement Association, who began to teach us about public speaking, and they had a separate training session at June Conference, Ward and Stake speech directors. In 1960, a little handout from conference tells us about the speech director who stands ready to give specialized training so that our ward members will be able to give more appropriate prayers, more impressive readings from the scriptures, and talks that represent the best efforts of the speakers. So this would suggest that the speech director had a role in the ward as a whole. So I found a little example of a speech director helping to set up in the ward a dialogue between a young man and a young woman who were engaged, and so this was a little role play of how the bishop would interact with this soon-to-be married couple, enhanced a little bit by the speech director. The 1960 notice from conference said that each year, usually in November, the speech competition program offers individuals a real opportunity to excel in the art of speaking, and that ward winners go into stake competition. Well, this caught my eye because 2 years later, in 1962, when I was in the Holiday 11th Ward in Mutual, I entered the speech competition, and that was a great experience for me. I pulled out of my Treasures of Truth this morning the copy of my speech, which I will not give, but the theme that year was Who is My Neighbor? But interestingly, in my little scrapbook, my Treasures of Truth, I gave my reaction to my participation in all of the superlatives, I think, that accompanied me at 14 years of age. I truly felt that the Mutual Speech Contest was a highlight of the year. I am so thankful to belong to a church that sponsors such character-building activities. It was a thrilling experience to have prepared the above talk. Upon winning, I was overjoyed. And then I've got a little note below my toil-worn copy that withstood nervousness and excitement. And when I looked at this little copy, awesome. I could see that someone had asked me questions that helped me flesh out this talk a little and improve it. And I'm sure that was the speech director. So that was my little intersection with the speech program.
Well, congratulations decades later on that winning.
Jill, I remember the speech director in my ward as well, but I also remember the drama and being in 3-act plays and participating as a young beehive all the way up until I graduated from high school. Do you have any information about that?
Yes, the drama program, just like speech, really goes back to the very beginnings. And of course, drama was always an important part of Mormon life. There was support for it in Nauvoo. There were plays in the Social Hall when that was built in the 1850s. And of course, the Salt Lake Theater was built in Salt Lake City in 1862 and dedicated by a member of the First Presidency. So there was a sense that good theater was an important part of the lives of young and old. At the turn of the century, in the Young Women's Journal, they began talking about how to produce plays. So already by 1902 and 1903, they're talking about the young women and young men producing plays. And again, as Carol indicated earlier, this is something that young men and young women could do together. They didn't do it separately. So they started talking about how to organize play production, and by 1910, in June conference, they were giving instructions on putting together plays. Alice Calder-Tudenham of the General Board taught that section in the initial June conference in 1910. And one of the things she said was this: you must understand that there is a big impression made upon the participant in a play. They study and rehearse the part and they live it. Therefore, we want them to live the right. And so this was, how do you find a level of entertainment that reflects Latter-day Saint standards, so that what we're portraying is refining and elevating? And this continued to be a challenge. How do you select plays that will reflect our values? And I'm going to say more about that in a minute. And also, how will you develop a program where numerous people participate? Some of the instructions they gave later said, change your cast. Do not let the first ones take part in the second play. We want to have our boys and girls feel that they are to take part, every one of them, in everything that happens in the Mutual, at least so far as it is possible. I think this emphasis on participation really spurred another development in drama, and that was the road shows. Like many things that happened in mutual improvement associations, this really came from the ground up. This started with stakes. It wasn't a general board program initially. So we see in 1924, for example, in the Granite Stake in Salt Lake City, the Young Women's Journal talked about what they had done. It says they had a road show called a merry-go-round, for which the stake was divided into 2 circuits. In this road show, there were 18 traveling troops from the various wards, 52 local acts with more than 250 people taking part. 35 autos transported the people from ward to ward, and it was accomplished without delay or accident and practically on scheduled time. There were about 2,500 people in attendance. Having been in roadshows myself, it's hard to believe that it was accomplished without delay, practically on scheduled time. Same thing with the Ensign Stake. They had a roadshow in 1924. The Improvement Era said the Ensign Stake Roadshow has become an annual event. Each ward MIA prepares a 10-minute act, and these sketches, together with other numbers supplied by the stake boards, are transported around the circuit so that the whole show is given in all the wards on the same evening. And so these road shows became a memorable part of Mutual. Many years ago, I did an oral history interview with LaRue Carr Longden, who was a counselor to Bertha Reeder in the Young Women's General Presidency between 1948 and 1961. And when I asked her what she remembered about early Mutual activities, she remembered the road show, and this would be from this early period that I've mentioned. She said in the oral history, we had a very wonderful little German bishop, Bishop Charles W. Hull, who was a man from Germany, and he spoke very broken English, a very spiritual little man. And she goes on to recall, I had just turned 17. Bishop Hull received a letter from someone, the mutual, I guess, asking that the wards put on road shows. And he said to me, I want you to write a road show. And I said, what's a road show? I had no idea. He said, they want a 10-minute act and they want you to use all the young people and develop their talents. In those days, you must remember, there was no TV, nothing to measure what we were going to do by. I had a little baby sister, a young sister that I loved dearly, Mary, and I thought, I'll write something about Mary. So I wrote a little deal on Mary, Marie, and Maria. At that time, 45 Minutes from Broadway was a song you were beginning to hear on your record players. We had an old-fashioned phonograph, and Papa had bought this music, and there was another song titled, Then It Was Mary, Mary, long before the fashions came. Well, we wrote it around that, and we won first place that year. I can't believe it. I'm sure we weren't that good, but neither was anybody else. So, these roadshows were great for giving everyone a chance to participate. Usually the words were written to popular songs. We have in the archives a little roadshow, script of a roadshow that was produced in 1952. I wonder how many hundreds of scripts have been thrown away, but this one somehow was preserved. Roadshow presented in the Waterloo Ward in the Wells Stake in Utah in the spring of 1952, called Zion Ahoy, about immigrants coming to Zion. And it was interesting to me. Instead of basing their songs on popular songs, they had used the Mutual Songbook of recreation songs and used the melodies from those songs and written a little roadshow. As I mentioned before, I think there was a real concern with finding appropriate dramatic material. Road shows were one way to handle that. And of course, concurrently with the road shows, these one-act plays and other dramas in Mutual went forward over a period of 40 years. From the 1920s until the late 1960s, the Mutual produced what was known as the MIA Book of Plays. And we have 40 volumes of MIA plays in the archives. And when they started running out of plays, they had playwriting contests so that plays could be written by members of the church and then published in these MIA Book of Plays and produced in various wards. I remember in our ward, I think we alternated. We had plays one year and then road shows one year, but we got plenty of experience in drama.
I think everybody in this room probably has a lot of experience in road shows and drama. It was a fun time for me growing up.
I'll never forget Dancing Like an Onion. We did a spoof on the onion farm that the church used to have.
That would be interesting to see.
You're listening to Legacy on the Mormon Channel of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We're talking about the history of young women activities today with members of the Young Women History Committee, Carol McConkie, Christine Van Wagenen, Brittany Chapman, and Jill Mulvey-Durr. It seems dancing has had a significant part of Mormon culture since its beginnings, and that must be at least part of the reason dance was popular among the youth of the church from the very beginning of Mutual. What do we know about early dance activities, and how did those events evolve?
Dance has been around for a very long time. Knowing a little bit of dance history myself, I know that it is so important to be able to express yourself through dance and through movement. In the church, however, it was a little more formal in its original setting, and everything from elegantly handwritten invitations. I have one in front of me right now, and maybe we could put that on the web just to kind of see. It wasn't like sending out a text message, everybody show up at 8, but these were beautifully done invitations. And I have this one in particular is back 1871. It was held in the 9th Ward on March the 10th. And it was interesting because the tickets at that time, they did need to purchase tickets, and the tickets were $1 a couple. In my readings, I found that if a young man came to a dance without a partner, he was charged double. So obviously it was necessary that we had equal number of men and women so that the dances could be held appropriately. Dance instruction was given beforehand so that during their mutual activities, they would have a dance director and someone who would teach them appropriate dance and social etiquette when they were attending the dances, so that when they came to enjoy that time together, they had some knowledge as to what to do. Dance directors were called. They were given information at student conferences by their leaders, and even dances were written out as how you were supposed to do those, and music was provided as well, which from those social dances, I think, was the involvement of the dance festival. And those were so exciting to participate in. Basically, what would happen is that in the small wards, they would have a dance director called, or maybe just someone who had ability to move well to music, whatever they had to work with, and they would go by the directions that were sent from Salt Lake during June conference. They would have dance music and the steps that they were to learn, diagrams as to how the group was to move, and then they had a special section on the costuming and how those costumes were to be made. I can remember that I participated in dance festivals, and I remember my mother actually making many of those costumes. That's one of the ways that I learned to sew as a participant in a dance festival. Our leaders got us together and said, you need costumes, and so we're going to teach you how to make them. I don't know that I loved making costumes, but I did learn a valuable skill that I still use today. But the dance festivals were such that hundreds and hundreds of youth could gather together, and we know how important those large activities are so that young people can participate together, that they can socialize, and that they can understand that they are part of a greater body of young people who are doing worthwhile things. I am particularly interested in how this evolved into Golden Green Balls. Now, which one of us hasn't seen a picture or have a memory of a Golden Green Ball? I have a couple of pictures here that hopefully we can put on the website so that they can see how glorious these Golden Green Balls were, how fancy they were, and what great lengths they went to provide such a beautiful setting. Something, once again, that was lovely, praiseworthy, and of good report. And these Golden Green Balls were held throughout the church in all kinds of small settings and large settings as well. The dress and the programs were all meticulously attended to. I appreciated especially the floor shows that they had an intermission of the music for the dancing. These were opportunities for other youth, perhaps, who were not eligible to attend the dance, who could participate and express their talents and abilities in those activities in between the regular dance. The floor shows were a part of the whole experience of the whole cultural experience, if you will, and lend itself to creating great enthusiasm for when you were old enough to actually participate in the ball. The gowns were beautiful. They even had royalty that were announced during the Golden Green Balls. They have pictures galore in the histories of what happened at those Golden Green Balls and the committees that worked on them, and I thought it was exceptionally well done. As the music for those dances was prescribed, it gave them a sense of what music was supposed to be. And they were introduced to classical things and to some more current trends as well. One thing that I loved about the dances back in the day at the Golden Green Balls, they would have a dance card, and you would know by number which dance was going to be performed. And so you would want to have learned those dances in your ward or in your stake early on so that you would not have to miss one dance during the evening. This music is a big part of all that we've done in the church forever. And music was very important to the cultural improvement of our young women. And as we were doing a little research, we came across a song that was the rose tying song. And Jill and I both remembered that, and we kind of broke out in song. We remembered it, and that was many years ago. But I applaud those who were writing all of that music back in the day, and I'm very interested to see maybe a larger collection of that and to kind of dig through our personal files and say, do we have any of that music left, and can we share that? Because the messages of the music becomes part of us and is in our hearts. And once again, it goes back to helping us to develop spiritually, emotionally, and mentally as well.
Thank you. One of the most familiar activities for young women is camp. Please tell us how camp was established as part of the Young Women organization.
Young women recorded their experiences, and things haven't really changed, which is exciting to see. And there's a awesome pictorial journal that was kept by some young women in 1932, and they've created their journal entries through both words and pictures. And we'll put this online so that you can see it. But I'm just going to read a couple entries for you that are really fun, and this could happen at any day and time. So July 23rd, 1932, and they have a picture of an alarm clock at 2 a.m. Up jumps our counselor, and quiet as a mouse, tiptoed to every bed and wakens us by the shining of her flashlight in our eyes. In the dark, we dress with only a few casualties, such as pants on backwards and shirts on inside out. Armed only with flashlights, we climb up Mount Majestic, viewed the sunrise, then after a good rest, started back down. Oh, how good was breakfast and how soft the beds when we got home. We rested most of the day. It was such a delightful event that will never be forgotten. This is dated July 19th, 1932. This morning, after the usual unpacking, dressing, and washing, we hiked up to Lake Mary, Lake Martha, and Lake Catherine, and Dog Lake. Our counselor pointed out all the pretty flowers and peaks of interest and held us in ecstasies all the while. In the evening, we each gathered firewood to throw into the bonfire out on the big rock for the friendship ceremony, where there was much singing and telling of stories, and then to bed. So they continue to write about their fun activities, which just takes you back into their world. But I think anybody who's been to girls' camp can identify with their stories and experiences.
So speaking of anybody having been to girls' camp, Brittany, how about you? Any story you'd like to share?
Let's see. I had a great experience with girls' camp. I do remember going on the fabled snipe hunt, which people probably remember nowadays. And this was my first year of camp, so I was 12 years old. And similar to what one young woman wrote about, being woken up with flashlights and walking through the woods up to see the sunrise. It wasn't quite like that, but we had our flashlights and we were being led through the woods by our trusted older counselors. And some of the girls knew that snipes didn't exist, but I was not one of those girls. So I kind of wondered what we would find. In the end, though, we had a great walk through the woods, and that was the snipe hunt.
Excellent.
Some things in the early camp manuals, if you were to look, you'd notice that they are not part of the camp program now, but they're folded into today's personal progress. And we have all sorts of fantastic programs now for young women that are maybe dressed up a little differently, but achieve the same objective of wanting to build testimony and help youth develop socially and leadership skills and grow in the gospel. And one of those is EFY, especially for youth. And So I was lucky enough to experience EFY as a 15-year-old. And I went to, having spent my teenage years in St. Louis, EFY was brought to the University of Kansas. So with friends of mine, we went there and experienced our first EFY together. And it was so valuable for me to have that experience away, like our fun little, like Emily Higgs quoted, away from the fond eyes of parents, and to just grow and develop in the gospel. And most of all, I think the biggest influence on me was the counselors who came and just showed me a different way of being and a different way of living the gospel that I'd never seen before, and digging into the scriptures in a new way, and really essentially learning a new morality was the biggest thing for me. I had basically learned morality from my friends. I never really had specific guidelines given or whatnot that helped me understand how to live a truly virtuous life. And going to EFY taught me how to live virtuously at a different level that I didn't know existed, and developed a commitment in me to strive higher for the gospel, and to strive higher in the gospel, to take hold more firmly. And so I think it's a fabulous experience for anyone to have.
I think, like you say, it gives youth a different perspective, although on the same plane of what the parents and the leaders at home are trying to teach.
Exactly.
Just a different setting and an opportunity to learn a different.
And I think a different voice through mentors that you look up to that are just a few years older than you, and that's very important.
This is Legacy on the Mormon Channel. I'm Nathan Wright, visiting today with Brittany Chapman, Christine Van Wagenen, Jill Mulvey-Durr, and Carol McConkie, all members of the Young Women History Committee. And we're discussing the history of young women activities today. So, what about sports? When did the perennial favorites of basketball, softball, and volleyball become a part of the Young Women's recreational program?
Well, actually, baseball, softball, and volleyball, etc., didn't come for a little while, but the very first record that we have is an annual day that was held from 1894 to 1904 in honor of Emelina Taylor. Her birthday was on September 12th, and so they decided that they would celebrate her birthday with the purpose to unite the young women of the Young Women MIA and to increase their pleasure in striving to do good and live exemplary lives like their president. Usually the day was celebrated with games and sports, all of those activities taking place out of doors. So it started early on as a celebration, and there were all kinds of activities that were not formally sports that were with rules and all of kind of competitive sports, but it was more just recreation. When June Conference was established, the MIA Day was changed to the month of June, and it was a field day, and the first one was held in 1911. Now, this time, they participated jointly, young men and young women, in literary and musical activities in the morning and sports and athletic activities in the afternoon. It was suggested that it would help them with their personal skills, and then they could come and perform and compete a little bit as well. Then in the afternoon, they would have all kinds of athletic activities. Most of those were held out of doors. And then in the evening, there was a grand ball for them all to participate in. It was encouraged at that particular time, as this was introduced, that they learned how to be good winners and good losers. So even back in the day in 1911, we were concerned about sportsmanship, which is still a concern today. Deseret Gym was established because of what was termed, they needed a place to go. they needed a place to participate in really good activities that could help them develop physically. And it would be in a good environment, as Carol mentioned earlier. There was other places to gather, but they probably weren't as wholesome as they could have been. And because they wanted them to participate in physical activities, it was really important that they had a place to go. So when the Deseret Gym was established, they also started to include young women. I've been reading in a book, The History of the Young Women, which was published in 1955, and they indicated that at that particular time there was all kinds of classes that were taught at Deseret Gym. They had dance classes and swimming classes, and they had activities and joint activities, and yet they wanted more for the young women. And so it was really because of the influence and the enthusiasm of the young women presidency and the superintendent of the young men to build another swimming pool and to really introduce a program for swimming for the young women and for the young men. Because they had a shortage of teachers, they began to use board members and I guess just about anyone who would come forward and volunteer to teach whatever they knew to help the young men and young women. It was 1927 when they began playing basketball. However, it was learned that the young women were playing men's rules and they were being coached by men. And so it was a deep concern. And so a letter was sent asking them to please play by feminine rules or girls' rules and have feminine coaches instead. There was so much going on at that particular time that they were trying to provide for young people that they could participate in physical activities. And it was interesting to me that as all of this evolved, that it became more of a central part of what we do in recreation and for young women and helping in their all over development. It also is interesting that the books that they have produced on recreational activities were very detailed. As we have read through some of those early books, activity books, they were very detailed. And today we have a great activity book that still stands, and activities are driven by some of those initial ideas. It doesn't take a whole lot to create activities for young people. We just have to be focused on them because it really does help them in their individual development.
Planning with a purpose is how I've heard it described. So.
I think that's exactly right.
Very good.
So how do these programs you've described compare to what the young women are doing today?
You know, it's interesting. As Christine mentioned, a lot of the purposes are really the same to help these young women develop in a well-balanced lifestyle. But we also see the competitive nature being diminished, and the idea of being compassionate and lifting the one and serving others as being very prominent in the objectives being learned through these activities. Might I just share, recently in one stake, the young women were organizing their basketball for the season and all of the games, and recognized that just down the hill from our stake it was a Swahili-speaking branch that included young women who were refugees from refugee families from Africa. And so they found someone who was willing to volunteer to be a coach for these Swahili-speaking sisters, these cute young women, and they included them in the schedule. And I have to just say it was a delight to see the young women from the East Bench of Salt Lake City stop playing and take the time to teach these young women how to dribble, how to shoot, and to interact with them. And even though there was a language barrier, through the game of basketball, there was built a real camaraderie and that lifted these young women and allowed these young women to recognize that they could come together as a team and work together and have fun and do some really fun things. And every time they scored a basket, I've never seen such celebration. Every basket was a big party. We're seeing a lot of these things as the church grows and becomes an international church. We see a lot of these recreational activities, games being exported to other countries, and we see them being integrated here, and it's very exciting.
Any other insights on how young women recreational programs have evolved and what is currently being done to provide activities for the youth?
Well, I think that the activities, as we watch how they evolved, Jill spoke about how a lot of the original ideas were coming from the stakes as the Mutual Improvement Association got underway and coming up to the general church. And then we start to see as the numbers of youth grow around the country and then in the world, that the activities become bigger and bigger, and direction comes down from Salt Lake. Through the 50s and 60s, the June conferences provided ways for the general officers of the church to actually script plays to outline the dances, as Christina so beautifully outlined for us, and to give prescribed information to the wards and stakes. And in the 70s, that began to change a little bit. And the general officers of the church became officers the general officers of the church were to provide general instruction and allow the wards and stakes the opportunity to work within their councils for bishops to hold a bishop's youth council and allow young women to learn how to counsel with priesthood leaders to plan and organize activities and then carry them out. And this idea of leadership begins to develop more completely among our young women and actually prepares them to take on roles as young women leaders within a very few years of their leaving within a very few months of their leaving the Young Women organization. And it becomes very exciting. We also see an emphasis on missionary work and service and temple building and temple work. Family history work becomes important activities as these youth work together with priesthood leaders. It also happens at the stake level, where there are stake youth councils that work together with stake presidents. And as they come forward with activities, it's inspiring to see some of the ideas that they come up with that help prepare activities that meet the needs and the concerns of our youth today. And that can be carried anywhere. The idea, the structure is in place today, and it works internationally and it works locally because it's the youth that are taking on these leadership roles, and it's very exciting.
I think it's interesting to note that the last June conference was in 1975, and from that point on, we have tried to follow the Prophet's counsel in simplifying and doing just as Carol has described, and bringing it back to a ward or a stake level so that they are well invested in the whole process of creating those activities. I think it's wonderful as we see whole families participating in these activities, such as large productions, and how the whole family is involved. Maybe someone who's on stage and someone who is behind this, backstage, and someone who's created costumes and so forth, that it is family recreation. And I think that is a big boon to the development of activities in the church. We also know that the camp and youth conferences and TREC have, as Brittany has talked about, has been really wonderful in developing these activities. our prophet today, President Monson, has said that he is an advocate for large activities. And as these young people are gathered together, they once again have that sense of celebrating who they are and what we are about, and that they do not see themselves isolated any longer, that they are part of a worldwide church, and that as they participate in recreational activities of any kind, that it will bring the blessings of the Spirit into their individual lives and collectively as a whole.
And I might add that one of the really thrilling things, Brittany also talked about EFY, and in 2006, the church planned a way for EFY to go out to the international church. And this was not to be financed by individual youth, but this was to be an opportunity for all youth to be included in at least a 5-day activity where they would leave their homes and their families and be prepared and commit to live honorably and worthily for those 5 days, to come and be taught by young single adult mentors who were leading out in virtuous ways. And it's been thrilling to see some of the results of this. This has caught fire in the international church. And we've got youth who come from homes where they might be the only member, or come from difficult circumstances, who are able to disengage, leave their lives behind, and come be elevated and lifted spiritually, physically. They're well fed, and emotionally they get to see a critical mass of other youth together and be strengthened by that, and recognize, as Christina said, that they are a part of a whole that is glorious and wonderful. The activities of the church are designed to lift and love and nurture young people into testimonies that are strong and sure, so that when it comes time for them to strike out on their own, they are able to stand alone and be strong in faith and in testimony.
Thank you. This has been an enjoyable discussion. Thank you very much for being here. The topic was the history of young women activities, and our guests today included Jill Mulvey-Durr, Carol McConkie, Christine Van Wagenen, and Brittany Chapman, all members of the Young Women History Committee. Thank you again for joining us on Legacy. I'm Nathan Wright, and you're listening to the Mormon Channel of The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.